Greetings to everyone, Mss.Roth.Recaps here. Today I'm going to explain a movie called The Nun, released in the year 2019. This story tells us about a priest with a haunted past and a novice on the threshold of her final vows are sent by the Vatican to investigate the death of a young nun in Romania and confront a malevolent force in the form of a demonic nun. Let's keep going with this story. Spoilers ahead. Stay safe and enjoy. The following occurred in 1952 at a Catholic monastery in a Romanian convent. Two nuns walked in a dark tunnel. In the first room, the nun came up with a key while the female prisoner was very scared. She said she needed faith, then opened the door alone and went inside. The female got scared, kneeled down, and started praying, but it wasn't long before she reached out a hand covered in the nun's blood, and returned the key to the female, telling her that the demon needed a host. So don't give it a chance. Then the mother was murdered and dragged inside. The female simply took the key and ran into the room, grabbing a rope. However, the door to the room slowly opened, and she did not dare to pause any longer. Then she went to the window and hung the rope. A figure appeared behind her, moving wherever the lights went out. The cross on the wall also hung upside down. The nun decisively jumped down below. A nun-like figure appeared in front of the window. A long time later, the farmer had carried goods through there. The first thing he saw was the rotting corpse in the middle, hanging in front of the monastery. The news was immediately brought to the Vatican in Rome. They held a meeting on the religion of suicide, which is a very terrible sin. So, they sent an investigator to go there to investigate the cause. They took a girl named Irene, who is familiar with the area's topography, and the address of the farmer named Frenchie, who discovered the body over here. Irene is playing with children right now. The nun came to say to Irene that someone was looking for her and changed into a dress, then went to see Father Burke, and when she heard that news, she felt strange because she had never been to Romania before. But the priest said that the church must have its own ideas. Frenchie here is still haunted because of the nun's hanging body. There was a knock on the door that startled him. He woke up outside, and two people had just seen a beautiful girl, who saw his eyes and let him kiss her hand. Then Father Burke and Sister Irene introduced themselves to him. So, he quickly apologized to Irene, but he refused to take them to the monastery, until Irene begs him to take them to the monastery. The three people then took the book and luggage to the location. On the way, Father Burke put the suitcase on the truck, only to find out that what they were taking was a carriage. Frenchie had to call someone to a halt in order to retrieve his luggage, and Frenchie stated that he was not from this area by chance, but he stayed to assist the villagers. In fact, Irene is not officially a nun yet because she has not yet taken the oath. At this moment, the carriage suddenly stopped in front of the forest. The priest revealed that they did not come only because the case was a religious investigation. They also passed through land filled with crosses. There is no specific record, but the entire village feels very taboo about this place when they see the corpse related to it. Frenchie contacted the monastery but got no response, so he kept it in a freezer room usually used to store vegetables. Because he remembered placing the body horizontally, but it is now in a sitting position, Father broke down, thinking it was a convulsion phenomenon of the corpse, and went to look at it, where he saw her hand clutching a broken key, which he took out of her hand and buried her there. Everyone noticed a broken bell in front of a tombstone in the cemetery behind the monastery, explaining that it was an old custom so that when they had already buried the person, they could ring the bell to ask for help. It was still dangling in front of the monastery gate. The pool of blood below was still not dry, even though a few weeks had passed. Frenchie pushed the door open to go inside the monastery. In the murky ancient monastery, the sword was lit with a candle flickering in the middle as they placed two stone coffins when they were about to enter. Irene suddenly realized that there was someone sitting behind her. Then the nun said hello to her, and she called herself a mother. Irene explained that she came to investigate the nun's death, but Mother didn't say anything. Mother has just informed them that it is time to leave and that they should return the following day. Then she let them spend the night outside the monastery. Father Burke, see that he tells Frenchie to go back to the village. Later, Frenchie will come back and take the kerosene lamp. After going out of the monastery, it was already dark. Suddenly, Frenchie saw a nun passing through the forest, and he hurriedly chased after her. He saw that the nun was still holding a noose, and he quickly chased after a tree. But suddenly the nun disappeared, and a pair of legs hung in front of the Frenchie, screaming. And as he fell to the ground, the other corpse fell on the nun's body, turning into a devil. The nun, revealing a horror face, made Frenchie hurriedly push her away. Then he ran into the land where the cross was buried. He decided to get one cross as a pledge and went inside the house. That night, Father Burke and Sister Irene were having dinner and talking about her past as a child. She frequently had strange dreams, which God referred to as signs pointing the way. But her family always thought she was crazy about this news. Now Father Burke recounts that during the war he went to France to investigate a boy named Daniel. He confirmed it was demonic possession, and the boy had to undergo exorcisms. When the church thought it was able to cast out the demon, it realized it still possessed the boy. So, he performed another exorcism himself, and the demon was driven out. But it was too late to save Daniel. The boy was seriously injured and died. At night, when Father Burke was sleeping, when he heard a noise, he awoke and grabbed a flashlight to look outside. He noticed someone still following behind him. There appears to be a shadow, and Daniel should have fled when he noticed it. Then Father Burke ran after him into the forest to find Daniel. He peeked behind the rock and ran. Then Daniel stood in front of a tombstone and vomited a snake from his mouth. It made Father Burke fall to the ground. The ghost then pursued Father, who panicked and ran back. He unintentionally fell into an open coffin that had already been opened. Then the ground above goes back to the way it was, and it keeps pulling the bell in the room. Irene was sleeping when she saw something strange. She woke up and walked out without knowing there was something wrong. The shadow always followed her to the monastery and saw inside the church where the nuns were praying in the middle. Suddenly, a tall shadow appeared and walked around the wall before appearing in front of the mirror. Irene became terrified when she saw such a wild place. She realized there was no one there at the time. But that nun suddenly grabbed Irene's shoulder, and then the mirror broke. The high cross also fell down, and they rushed out. Father Burke is still dragging his bells for assistance at this time. Irene, hearing the bells, ran into the forest, but strangely, all the bells rang at once, making her disoriented at this time. Irene calmed down by closing her eyes and following her mother's advice. Then she arrived at the correct location, where her Father Burke was imprisoned, but the ground above was flat and overgrown, so he took the shovel next to it. Dig the ground, but inside, Father Burke tried to turn on the lighter to look around, and the bell rope suddenly stopped ringing. Suddenly, two hands reached out from behind and grabbed the old man's head, quickly breaking open the lid of the coffin. He even managed to cut off his father's head before suffocating, confirming that there was a demonic force here. When they looked back in the grave, he was stuffed in there, where they discovered two ancient books. The next day, Irene wore the vestments back to the monastery. The stairs bled even more when they entered a pulled-up door, which broke with it, as it was probably important to the nun who had lost Irene carefully entering. Inside, she saw a nun upstairs, so she followed through the long corridor into the church and approached a nun who was praying. When she wanted to inquire, another person stopped her, saying that she was an old man. This monastery has had eternal worship for many centuries, and the nuns here have to pray continuously and at the same time across the village. Frenchie brought the cross to the pub here, and when he heard that a 12-year-old girl had just hanged herself, the whole town said it was because of the devil from the monastery. Later, he goes back to the monastery in the forest. Meanwhile, Father Burke read the other two old books inside, which were written about the demons. He read that the name Valak is likened to the stripping of a snake. The other gate suddenly opened and began slamming shut at this point. In the other room, Irene and the nun continued to tell the old story to Irene. Next, the nun said the dead person is the Ser Victoria, who is also the one who sacrifices the most of them at the moment the door keeps opening automatically. Irene was asked about the history of the monastery. The owner said it was built by a demon nun in the Dark Ages. He was obsessed with occult forces. So, he performed rituals to summon the forces from hell. He created a gate that allowed the most fearsome demon to come here. But before he could finish, he was stopped by the ecclesiastical knights from killing him and sealing the gate with an ancient relic containing the blood of Jesus. And from there, the undying prayers of the nuns began to protect the monastery and prevent the evil from rising. However, after the war, the bombings caused the gate to crack, and the devil found a way to release him this time. Irene said he saw a shadow last night. Then she said it was the devil in the disguise of a nun. And its appearance meant that the gates of hell were open again this time. Another nun walked in, and when she knew who had not taken the oath, she invited her out. Here, but now the door is closed, so she can only leave. Tomorrow morning, an older leader will be in her room. When Irene asked her about the key, she's scared and said she didn't know what was outside. Back at the monastery, Father Burke attempted to find another way in, but the top mother appeared and said there was nowhere to find it. At this point, the mother said it was too late to find it and he would lose his life. After that, the candle in his hand slipped out. Father Burke reached out to see his face under his robe, but suddenly she reached out and grabbed him, panicking, and ran out, only to find it was just a pile of white dew, and Irene again fell into a nightmare in which she saw herself and an evil face. She was startled to wake up and see someone sitting in the corner of her room. So, she came closer to see, not noticing that the bedside cross was turning upside down in the nun's hand. She collapsed all over the floor, bent down to pick it up, then vanished, reappeared behind her, and jumped downstairs. This is the room. Then she noticed that Victoria died last month. The door had broken at this point. Unexpectedly, the door opened. Irene brought down the courtyard, and she entered a dark tunnel filled with crosses when the door opened at noon. The candle in her hand went out. But inside the room appeared a person dressed in a nun's uniform with evil eyes who wanted to kill her, and she fled. But in the tunnel, suddenly, the key in her pocket fell out, and Irene grabbed it, and she fell down. Another pair of hands from the wall drew her in at this point, when Irene wanted to faint. However, she discovered someone, previously fallen nuns. She said the demon was getting stronger and asked Irene to come pray with her. Then Irene wore a tuxedo to the synagogue. She saw a body covered with a towel. When Irene unfolded the towel, she was astounded to discover it was Sister Nun, who was holding a cross with bloodshot eyes. Outside of her, Father Burke couldn't make sense of what he saw in the nun, so he followed for a while and saw Daniel screaming at him. The statues then fell on Father Burke. While Daniel has a long, snake-like tongue, he fled when Father Burke saw the devil behind him. It took a while before he remembered the door where Frenchie brought vegetables into the monastery, and rushed to it, but when he was about to open the door, he heard the bell ring, and it moved to a wall he looked at, an ice cellar containing vegetables. Unexpectedly, someone raised his hand and emerged, but the priest could open the door, and Frenchie came to help Father Burke chase the devil away with the farmer's shovel. After Irene's panicking about things, she saw the other nuns also coming in, so she put on a white towel, and she kneeled next to them and began to pray. But soon after the wind picked up, the other nuns were thrown all over the place. Someone broke their neck and died on the spot above the statue, and the mother also lost her head. Irene suppressed her fear and continued to pray, but suddenly, her shirt was opened one by one and cut completely across her skin. But she did not stop and continues to pray alone. In the end, it was the shining image of the devil behind her back. Suddenly there was a knock on the door. It was Irene. She then hurriedly opened the door for them and explained what she was doing inside. After that, they returned to the church, and Father Burke said it was all an illusion because of the nuns. This place was filled with dead nuns, but Irene couldn't believe it until Father Burke opened the cloth and saw that it was just a dry corpse. The corpse stood up and stabbed the priest in the stomach with the cross she was holding. Later, Irene got the cross, poured holy water on it, and gave it to his father. The sister nun groaned, and Father Burke placed it on her head to perform an exorcism. Then the fire burns into her body. At last, Frenchie used one shot to end the incident. Father Burke said the devil needed an entity to enter, and Victoria did not commit suicide but sacrificed to stop the devil from achieving his goal. Frenchie suggested they should leave immediately. While Irene said she decided to seal the gate, the two of them helped her. Father Burke, who had bandages on his stomach, said to Irene that she could seal. They needed the relic, and thanks to Mary's instructions, Irene thought it was hidden somewhere in the street. They then go to the catacombs. First, Irene wants to swear she has completely devoted her life to God, and then they go into the tunnel. The priest followed his finger from the statue of Our Lady of Eisen, inserting the key into the brick slot, which actually opened a door inside which was a glass vase containing the Lord's blood. He later wrapped it around Irene's neck, and then split up to find a way to the gates of hell. Frenchie then set it on fire to see where he was going and entered a room. Immediately, a gust of wind came out and blew out his torch, causing the farmer to run to the smoke, where Irene was walking on the corridor. Someone was suddenly following her, but it wasn't the person who had called her Irene's name. When she turned around, a nun with no face pressed her head against the wall. Irene went inside by herself. Suddenly, another candle burned on the ground, then, one by one, the lights around her began to burn in this manner. Irene realized she was standing in the center of a star shape. When she wanted to run away but was stopped by a group of nuns covering her head to stop hearing Irene's screams. Father Burke ran into this side and unexpectedly ran over to see a grave. A group of nuns stood here waiting for him. He turned on the lamp, poured oil on the ground to make a cross, then read the Bible, and the flame of the cross burned to stop the demons. Other side Frenchie broke the door to the room and saw a group of nuns standing around. He went in to look for Irene, but those burlap heads kept spinning after him. Then they dispersed at that time by leaving the middle of the room, where Irene was standing in a weird pose. No! Now Irene's face had turned into the devil's face. She then yelled to Frenchie, pushing him to stick against the wall. And she stood up briefly, took out a gun, approached him, and scolded him, saying he was the main problem and that he was so stupid. When she tried to kill him, Frenchie removed the blood bottle from Irene's neck and applied it to her eyes, awakening her from an evil spirit. Immediately, Frenchie grabbed Irene's hand and tried to run, but the evil nun shouted up and strangled him at the river. After Irene saw this, she wanted to save him, but the evil nun then shouted at her and threw her into a lake, and the evil nun strangled this guy for a while and then threw him away, and he fainted at that time. Father Burke had run because Daniel chased him, and he was caught by Daniel. On Father Burke's neck, the snake strangled him. Then the snake bit his face in pain. Father Burke had fallen down in pain. When Irene was awake, she saw that she was in the river, so she found a way to the shore, and she quickly grabbed the blood bottle. But the evil nun called Valak comes to Irene. Suddenly, Valak appeared in the middle of the lake with an ugly face that insulted Irene, then rushed to strangle her. Valak pressed her head into the water. When Father noticed this, he attempted to bring the cross, but Valak yelled, "Throw him out!" Valak then strangled Irene while trying to knock her out with one hand while grabbing the blood bottle. Irene will die of asphyxiation. Valak tried to pull the blood pot out of the water, shook it, and pulled it up. But suddenly Valak discovered that the vase was empty. At that time, Irene sprayed the blood in her mouth, and the blood dripped into Valak's face, causing the gate of hell to open. The current shock situation has turned out to be the entrance to hell. The water began to be swept down, and the Valak also painfully melted and fell to the bottom of the lake. But Irene was exhausted. Knocking her unconscious, she sank into the water. Luckily, Frenchie jumped into the water and pulled on the shore. He saved Irene's life through resuscitation, and Irene awoke ready to live again. Frenchie, he revealed that his real name is Maurice. Irene was very grateful to him. After that, he put a bandage on Father Burke. They then left the monastery, but no one knew that there was an inverted cross on Maurice's neck. 20 years later, at Irene's presentation show, she gave a spiritual talk with her couple to a genetics student. They replayed a video of an exorcism to ward off the demon inside Maurice's body. In the presentation, they showed a shot of someone being stabbed to death with a stake. This sparked an investigation into the couple's family history regarding demon possession. And we can see that there is also an encounter with Valak, which we saw in part 2 of the haunted horror. The movie is now over compared to other parts. For me, I think the film Before the Devil is a bit less attractive because the final boss character makes the viewer less afraid. But this movie looks good for me and people who like horror movies. Thank you for supporting us. Please give me a like and a comment to feel about your feeling in this movie. Thank you for watching. I hope you liked it. Especially please subscribe for more videos like this. Turn on notifications and give like to help the channel out. Mss.Roth.Recaps. See you again dear friend in the next videos.